go. Wait. Hold on, Q. Feel like I'm at the tippy top of my game, looking down at the rafters. I had to sun these boys, can't leave them bastards. A lot of dudes, just some undercover actors. I don't fall for it, I'm privy to all your tactics. Yeah, so try again, this time take a vitamin. Yeah, invite them in, welcome to the Lion's Den. And
We've been lied to when it comes to aperture and micro four thirds, and I will prove that in this video. Okay, so let's get into this juicy finding of a micro four thirds sensor versus full frame sensor when it comes to aperture. Now, I've been also part of this thing of saying that you need to multiply the aperture times 2 to have an equivalent depth of field and low light performance as a full frame camera. So I would take all my f2.8 lenses and I would multiply that by 2 to get a 5.6, and then that made me decide on which lens I would buy to get the equivalent depth of field. I was messing around with my S5 and my GH6. Now the GH6 has an Olympus 12-40 f2.8 Pro lens, which is a very nice lens. And so I've done some tests. This is the Lumix S5 with the 20-60mm kit lens. Now this lens is a 3.5 to a 5.6. So these tests that I'm going to show you is that I'm going to put everything to the same aperture, a 5.6 versus f2.8, which is a 5.6 times 2, you have a 5.6. So I put them together and some interesting results came from it. Shutter of 1/1000 at the native ISO of 850 and at 5.6, and it's about 1 stop overexposed. And this is going to be shot in 1080p because the C100 only does 1080p. So okay, this is just a experiment to show the exposure. So no ND filters, 5.6 aperture, 1/1000 shutter, and the native ISO of 850. Okay. Okay, so now the next one is I'm going to put the full frame on. I am setting up the Panasonic S5 at ISO of 800. I mean, I can't do 850 like the Canon, but it's okay. And then I'm going to crank the shutter to 1000. So right now what it's showing me on the exposure, same ISO, same aperture, same shutter, but at 4K 10-bit, because this is what this camera does, shooting at 25 frames a second so that it's using the full frame and not a crop sensor part. And so what it shows me here on the exposure meter is that it is slightly underexposed. The Canon showed that it's by 1 stop overexposed, and the Panasonic S5 is showing me that it's a third underexposed. But let's see. So I'm pressing record and I'm gonna go sit down. So are you gonna track me? Pretty sure you can, but I don't know. All right, same angle. So how does this look? How's the light outside? How's contrasting light looking? But yeah, the camera measures lower on exposure meter, so which is quite interesting. It's also shooting at V-Log, and yeah. Okay, so we're gonna put on the Panasonic GH6 right now. See, this one is also going to be at 800 ISO. Gonna have to set the shutter to 1000, and the f-stop at 5.6. This is going to be at 12mm, which is technically at 24mm, and then I'm just going to move it out. Interesting reading again. Now remember, I've set this to a 5.6. The S5, which is a full frame, this is micro four thirds. I've set this now to the same aperture, the same shutter speed, and the same ISO, and it's reading the exact same amount of light as on the full frame sensor. So you would have thought the full frame sensor would give a bigger reading, like more light comes into the camera, but no, it showed less light than the Canon C100, and it is showing the same amount of light for the Micro Four Thirds sensor. Same shutter speed, same everything. And just to show you, so as you can see here, shutter speed is at 1/1000, 5.6 aperture, 800 ISO, also shooting in Vlog, same Kelvin, same 10-bit, this is not 420 at 25 frames a second. But this is what you're seeing. For me, which is very interesting, is that we have a full sensor readout. I made sure that we shoot on the full frame sensor and not in crop mode. So we have the exact same light, same shutter, same ISO, same aperture, same focal length, and the two read exactly the same. And now, for the test to show you, because an f2.8 times 2 is supposed to give a 5.6. If I crank this thing down, let me record this. If I crank it down to an f2.8, I am exactly 2 stops overexposed. And I will show you that again. So here on the reading, f2.8, you have 2 stops overexposed. Same shutter, same ISO, but now I'm 2 stops overexposed. So let's go sit down and see how it looks. See, so this is where I realized that Aperture has been a lie when it comes to Micro Four Thirds sensors, because they would say, you have a 2.8 lens, you have to times that by 2 to have the same depth of field and the same amount of light as a full frame sensor. And as you can clearly see right now, that has been a lie. And so now I'm going to put the C100 back onto the stand, and I'm also going to drop the aperture to a 2.8, and then we have a look. Alright, so setting this camera up. Okay, so as you can see, I had it on 5.6. The native ISO for C-Log is 850 and still at 1000 shutter speed. Now I'm going to drop it to a 2.8, and as you can see the reading now, it's 1, 2, 3, just over 3 stops overexposed, which is interesting. So yeah, you can clearly see that I'm running 3 stops overexposed. A 50 ISO is not going to make that big of a difference. And remember, the GH6 is a Micro Four Thirds, this is a Super 35 sensor, crop sensor. Still shooting at 1080p, 25 frames a second, at 24 megabits a second. It's not even 10-bit. So let's see. So I'm just going to go sit down here again. I want to know the blur. I've seen the difference between a Micro Four Thirds and a full frame sensor. Same output, but it's going to be a little bit different when it comes to the background. But let's just put it like this for now. Okay, so now that you've seen the C100, now we're going to do a test inside in a controlled environment, controlled lighting, with one object, and then we take a look and see. Now that we're back in the studio, for a lot of echo, but it's fine, I'm going to set up the cameras towards the coffee machine at a certain angle, because there's a lot of details in the coffee machine and background blur and all of that. So I'm going to also put on the light here at the back. Put that on. All right. So again, I'm going to start off with the S5, with the Panasonic S5. Same focal length, the 25 mm, 25.5 mm. I'm going to do the same and I'm gonna set the aperture 5.6, ISO 800. I'm gonna drop the shutter speed to 50 shutter. Shutter speed is at 150, 5.6, and 800 ISO, and you can see that the exposure shows that it's just below 0. And as you can see now in the footage, still shooting in vlog, focused on the Steam 1 tip, how much background blur is there? Now let's grab the Canon C100. Okay, so Canon C100 Mark II, 5.6 aperture, 850 native ISO, and 1/50 shutter. And now, as you can see, it also shows one stop underexposed. But how does the blur look? Background blur. How does the image look? Okay. We're going to put on the GH6 now, and then we can have a look. As you're going to see now, I'm going to lift up the aperture to a 5.6. I'm going to drop the shutter to 1/50, and I'm going to keep it at 800. So, and as you can see also now, the Micro Four Thirds is measuring also one stop underexposed. 5.6, 50, 800. So how does the background blur look like? Does it look good? Does it look any different? Very interesting. So now that you've seen the results between a full frame, a crop sensor, and a Micro Four Thirds sensor, those were the results that I got, which was very interesting because, like I said, I always believe that what they were saying about a Micro Four Thirds sensor, that you need to multiply the aperture in order to get the same amount of light as a full frame sensor. So when it comes to light, I totally disagree with that. A 2.8 on a Micro Four Thirds sensor is going to be a 2.8 on a full frame sensor. Part that I do agree with is when it comes to the background blur, you're still going to have more background blur on a full frame. Even though you're shooting at the same aperture, same ISO, same shutter, you're going to get more background blur on a full frame, which we all know. That's why everybody wants the full frame look. But what stood out for me was when it comes to light, the aperture and light. That's when I started noticing, but hang on, that's not true what they're saying. There's many ways around aperture and background blur, but when it comes to light, we've been lied to. But anyway, I'll see you in the next video.